They say humiliation is painful, but no one tells you how deep it cuts when it comes from your own blood. I stood there, frozen in the middle of a marble hotel lobby, the sound of my daughter-in-law's voice ringing in my ears. "Don't talk to the old lady, she's just the maid." And then laughter. Not from a stranger, but from my own son. He laughed like she'd just cracked the funniest joke in the world. And at that moment, surrounded by strangers staring and phones quietly recording, I felt more invisible than I had in all my 72 years. But what none of them knew, what she didn't know, was that the hotel we were standing in was mine. This vacation was supposed to be something different. It had been years since I had any meaningful time with my son, Daniel, and his new family. So when he suggested a week-long getaway to Gulf Crest Beach, I let my heart hope again. Hope for connection, for belonging, maybe even for a chance to feel like a mother again. I had dreamed of hearing my grandchildren laugh, of sitting together over dinners where no one was rushing off. It was foolish of me. I realize that now. The 4-hour drive to the resort had been long, but not for the reasons you'd think. I sat quietly in the back seat while Daniel and his wife, Betrayal, chatted endlessly about spa appointments, golf games, and 5-star restaurants. They didn't look at me once in the rearview mirror. I tried inserting myself into the conversation a few times. Asked about the kids, suggested some things we could all do together. Betrayal responded with stiff, clipped answers, eyes always hidden behind those oversized sunglasses of hers. Daniel didn't even bother pretending. He acted like I wasn't there. And still, I held on to hope. The resort, Seabreeze Grand, was the crown jewel of my life's work, though they didn't know it. It wasn't always like this. Years ago, after my husband passed, I started with a tiny coastal inn. I cleaned the rooms myself, made breakfast for guests, handled the bookings with shaking hands. It took me decades to build my hotel business. Blood, sweat, grief, and more lonely nights than I care to remember. But I kept it all private. I didn't want Daniel to love me because I was rich. I wanted him to love me because I was his mother. As we pulled up to Seabreeze Grand's sweeping entrance, pride swelled in my chest. The driveway was perfectly manicured, palm trees gently swaying, and a valet jogged out in a crisp uniform. I watched from the back seat as Daniel handed over the keys, while Betrayal adjusted her flawless curls and smoothed her peach-colored designer dress. She was stunning, I'll give her that. The kind of beauty you rent from stylists and buy from exclusive boutiques. And she wore her age, barely 35, as if it made her royalty. "I want the penthouse. Make sure it's ready," she muttered to Daniel as we stepped onto the stone walkway. "I don't care what they say about availability. It's mine." Daniel nodded like an obedient shadow. He used to be bold, used to challenge the world with his opinions. But somewhere between law school and Betrayal, that spark in him disappeared. The boy I raised was gone. The lobby doors slid open, and I was welcomed by the familiar scent of polished wood, citrus air diffusers, and fresh lilies. The front desk buzzed with activity, and I couldn't help smiling. Every detail had been designed by me. The marble, the lighting, even the curved check-in counters. This was my kingdom. Behind the desk stood Mia, one of my longest-serving staff members. Her eyes flicked up and widened when she saw me. But I gave her a subtle shake of my head. I wasn't ready to reveal myself. Not yet. "Good afternoon," Mia said politely. "Welcome to the Seabreeze Grand. How can I help you today?" "Reservation for Parker," Daniel replied. "We should have the penthouse." Mia typed quickly, her fingers moving over the keyboard like a pianist. "Yes, Mr. Parker. You're confirmed for a deluxe ocean view suite. I'm sorry, but the penthouse is currently occupied for the duration of your stay." The moment Betrayal heard it, her face hardened. The polite mask she wore snapped in half. "Excuse me," she said sharply. "That's unacceptable. Do you even know who we are? I requested the penthouse weeks ago." Mia remained composed. "I understand, Mrs. Parker, and I truly apologize for the inconvenience. But no excuses. I want the penthouse. And I want it now." The guests in the lobby began to turn their heads. The room grew quieter. I stepped forward, heart pounding, hoping to calm her down before it turned into a scene. "Betrayal, maybe we could." That's when she turned. Fury twisted her pretty features. She snapped loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "Don't you dare speak. Mia, or whatever your name is, Don't listen to the old woman. She's not important. She's just the maid we brought with us. Time stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Someone dropped a drink. I felt the heat rise to my face, and my chest tightened with a sharp sting. My mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. The air in the lobby had become thick, suffocating. She's just the maid, Betrayal repeated, pointing at me like I was trash. Don't waste your time. It wasn't even the insult that broke me. It was what happened next. Daniel, my son, laughed. Not a polite, awkward chuckle, but a full head thrown back, can't catch your breath laugh. Bree, you're awful, he managed to say between bursts. But not wrong. Mom, seriously, let us handle this. Just go sit somewhere. That was the moment I broke. This boy, this man whom I had raised alone, protected, sacrificed for. He stood there laughing as his wife degraded me in front of strangers. People were recording. Others stared. Some whispered, others shook their heads. And I stood there, clutching the handle of my suitcase like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Ma'am, Mia said gently, clearly shaken, maybe you'd like to wait in the lounge while we sort this out. Before I could move, Betrayal rolled her eyes. Yes, get the old woman out of here. Find someone to watch her. She wonders if you're not careful. More laughter from Daniel. More stares. More pieces of me splintering. But I didn't cry. I didn't run. I reached down, lifted my small bag, and walked toward the elevator. Behind me, Betrayal continued yelling about the suite like a spoiled heiress. As I stepped into the elevator, I turned my head just enough to catch Mia's eye. She gave me the smallest, most respectful nod. She knew. And I knew what I had to do. The elevator doors closed gently, sealing me in silence. As it rose toward the 12th floor, I stood very still, my hand wrapped tightly around the suitcase handle. My legs were shaking, but I forced them to stay firm. Inside, my chest burned. Not from anger, not yet, but from something colder. Something like heartbreak. Something like disbelief. I had spent 72 years walking through fire, building everything from nothing, and now I was standing in the very hotel I had created, being treated like garbage by the people I loved most. My room was beautiful. It always had been. A soft cream-colored suite with tall windows looking out at the sea. The ocean waves rolled in peacefully, just like I remembered, brushing against the sand like it was whispering secrets. Normally, I would have loved that view. Normally, I would have sat with a cup of coffee, taken in the sunlight, felt grateful. But that day, I couldn't feel anything at all. I hadn't slept much that night. I kept hearing Betrayal's voice sharp and loud. She's just the maid. And Daniel laughing. My son, my own flesh and blood. Laughing. Not once had he stepped in. Not once had he looked at me with concern or said, Mom, are you okay? I kept playing it all back in my head. Over and over. What could I have done differently? Should I have spoken up sooner? Should I have told them who I was? But then I'd remember Daniel's face. His smirk, his easy chuckle like it was all a big joke, and the shame would return like a wave crashing over my heart. A soft knock pulled me out of my thoughts. I opened the door to find Daniel standing in the hallway, dressed casually, flipping his car keys in his hand like everything was perfectly normal. Hey Mom, he said, smiling faintly. We're heading down to breakfast. Betrayal wants you to watch the kids by the pool afterward. We've got a spa appointment. No, good morning. No, how are you? Just another instruction. I swallowed my pride. Daniel, about last night. He waved it off. Don't start, Mom. Seriously. Bree was just upset about the room. You know how she gets when things don't go as planned. Let it go. She called me the maid, I said quietly. In front of everyone. He shifted his weight. Avoided eye contact. She didn't mean anything by it. You're taking it too seriously. Let's not ruin the trip, okay? The word stung. Taking it too seriously, he said. As if being humiliated in public by your own family was just another little mishap. A parking ticket. A spilled drink. Fine, I said, my voice thin. I'll watch the kids. His shoulders relaxed instantly. Great. We'll be back late afternoon. Lunch. Maybe a little shopping. Thanks. Mom. You're the best. He disappeared down the hallway without another word. I stared at the closed door for a long time. Breakfast was held in the open-air dining room near the pool. The view was lovely, the water sparkling, birds flying overhead, but none of it touched me. Brielle had taken over the best table by the window. She was already halfway through ordering when I arrived. "I want fresh orange juice, not that box stuff," she told the waiter, a young man I recognized as Liam. He'd worked here for 3 years. "And the eggs should be exactly 3 minutes. Not a second more. I'll know if they're off." Liam smiled politely, though I could see the tension in his jaw. He wasn't new to demanding guests, but Brielle had a special talent for pushing people past their limits. I looked at my grandchildren, Mia and Caleb, 8 and 10. They sat glued to their tablets, not even glancing up. I walked over, trying to smooth Mia's hair gently, whispering, "Good morning, sweetheart." Before I could touch her, Brielle slapped my hand away. Not hard but firm. "Don't touch her. She just had her hair done. I don't want it messed up." I pulled back, the sting of embarrassment worse than any slap could have been. Mia didn't even notice. Caleb kept tapping away at his game. "Kids," Daniel said casually, not looking up from his phone. "Say good morning to Grandma Irene." "Morning," they mumbled, eyes still on their screens. I sat down in the only chair left, the one facing away from the ocean, tucked between a planter and a post. Brielle had made sure of that. She had the seat with the best view, legs crossed, sipping green juice like she was some kind of queen. "Irene," she said, barely looking in my direction. "After breakfast, you'll take them to the pool. Put sunscreen on them every hour. Mia burns easily. If she gets even a little pink, I'll hold you responsible." I nodded silently. "And don't let them near the deep end. Also, no pool snacks. They're full of sugar and chemicals. If they need anything, call me. Don't try to handle it yourself." Every sentence was like a tiny stab. As if I'd never raised a child in my life. As if I was just an old forgetful woman who needed constant direction. "How long will you be gone?" I asked. Brielle smiled coldly. "As long as we want. It's our vacation. You're just here to help." Daniel didn't say a word. After breakfast, I took the children to the pool. I tried talking to them, asking about school or their favorite games, but they didn't respond. They stared at their screens, occasionally grunting or shrugging. Around us, other families laughed and played. Dads tossed their kids in the water. Moms helped with floaties. Grandparents clapped from the sidelines. And here I was, sitting with 2 children who barely looked at me. We looked like strangers. "Grandma," Mia said suddenly, not looking up. "Mom says you used to clean houses for rich people. Is that true?" The words hit me like a slap. I had never cleaned houses. I had built an empire. I had created 17 properties across 3 states. I had spent years working 15-hour days to make something out of nothing. But this was what Brielle had told them? "No, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice gentle. "I own businesses. I build hotels." Caleb finally looked up. "Mom says you make up stories because you're embarrassed about being poor." I stared at him. I wanted to speak, but no words came. They didn't know. They truly didn't know. "My grandmother is not poor," I said slowly. "And I don't make up stories." "That's what Mom says," Mia replied with a shrug. "She says you live in a tiny apartment and pretend to be rich." I felt hollow inside. My apartment overlooked the bay and was worth more than their parents' entire house. But to these kids, my grandkids, I was a joke. A sad old woman living in fantasy, clinging to lies because she had nothing real. For 6 hours, I sat by that pool. I watched 2 children who didn't know me, didn't want to. I smiled when they needed water. I reapplied sunscreen every hour. I kept them safe. And inside, I crumbled a little more with every passing minute. When Daniel and Brielle returned that evening, they looked refreshed, glowing from their day of pampering. "How were the kids?" Daniel asked, already checking his phone. "Fine," I said, because what else could I say? "Good," Brielle said lightly. "Tomorrow you're watching them again. We're going to play golf, then having lunch with some friends." I nodded. But something inside me shifted. And I knew without a doubt, this was not going to continue forever. The third morning of our so-called vacation began just like the others, with Brielle giving me a list of instructions while Daniel scrolled through his phone like nothing was wrong. I stood in the doorway of their suite, holding Mia's sun hat and Caleb's water bottle, waiting for her to finish brushing mascara onto already perfect lashes. "Today we're going on a vineyard tour," she said, examining her reflection. "Should be back around 6. Might be later, depends on traffic." Daniel didn't even look at me when he added, "Yeah, just keep them fed and entertained." I nodded, but inside I was screaming. I had raised a child. Alone. I had kept him fed, clean, safe, loved, for decades. But now, somehow, I was being treated like I didn't know how to keep 2 kids alive for one day. As Brielle packed her oversized designer bag, I heard her talking to someone on speakerphone. "No, I can't do dinner tonight," she said. "Stuck babysitting duty again. It's ridiculous. But just a few more days and then we won't have to deal with her anymore." I froze. I wasn't supposed to hear that. But I had. And it didn't sound like she was just talking about the end of the vacation. That one sentence hit me harder than anything else she'd said so far. Just a few more days. What did that mean? What exactly were they planning? After they left, I didn't take the kids to the pool like usual. Instead, I brought them to the Seabreeze Kids Club, a special service I had created for families, though Brielle clearly had no idea. The staff there lit up when they saw me, treating me with kindness that felt like sunlight after too many cold days. I watched as Mia and Caleb finally started acting like children again. Laughing, talking to other kids, actually being happy for once. And I allowed myself, for the first time since I arrived, a small moment of peace. With a few hours to myself, I walked the property. Not as the owner, but as a quiet observer. I took off the invisible chains of being their maid, and just looked. The gardens were thriving. The poolside bar was busy. Guests were smiling. My staff was moving with the kind of care I had trained them to give. And then I heard voices I recognized, just past the cabanas near the pool bar. I stayed out of sight, ducking behind one of the tall palm trees. Brielle. Daniel. They weren't at the vineyard. They were sitting with another couple, sipping drinks, chatting like royalty. Laughing. Relaxed. "I mean, she's getting old," Brielle said with a giggle. "Old people don't live forever." Someone else laughed. "Brielle, that's awful." "I'm practical," she replied. "Daniel's an only child, so everything comes to us eventually. It's just a matter of time." My breath caught. My knees nearly buckled. Another voice, one I didn't recognize, asked, "Does the old woman have any money of her own?" Daniel's voice, my son's voice, answered easily. "No. She's flat broke. Tiny apartment. Lives off Social Security. I've been supporting her for years." A lie. A complete lie. I lived in a penthouse overlooking the bay. My investments brought in more income than most people made in 5 years. And I had been the one supporting him. I had been paying his mortgage, his kids' school fees, even Brielle's beauty treatments and shopping trips. They didn't just lie. They had built a whole story around that lie. "That's why this trip is such a pain," Brielle added. "We have to drag her along because she can't afford anything. It's like traveling with a sad little pet." The other woman made a fake sympathetic sound. "Ugh. That must be exhausting." "She probably expects us to take care of her when she gets old," the woman added. "Over my dead body," Brielle laughed. "The second she needs real care, she's going straight to a state facility. I'm not turning my house into a nursing home." My hand clutched the tree trunk behind me, trying to stay steady. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was horrified. They weren't waiting for me to die naturally. They were planning to abandon me the moment I became inconvenient. Then Daniel spoke again. "The funny part is, she still thinks she matters. Tells these ridiculous stories about being a hotel owner. It's kind of sad how delusional she's become." "Dementia?" the other man asked. "Maybe," Daniel replied. "Or maybe she's just desperate to believe she's not useless." Brielle laughed. "Yesterday she tried to tell the kids she owns hotels." "Hotels? Can you imagine?" They all laughed together. Laughed. My heart broke in places I didn't know existed. "She still thinks we invited her because we care," Brielle said. "She has no idea she's just here to babysit while we enjoy ourselves." I backed away slowly, feeling dizzy. I couldn't fall apart there. Not where they could see. I forced myself to breathe slowly, carefully. I walked back to my room like I was sleepwalking. Once I was behind the locked door, I fell onto the bed and let the tears come. I let them pour until there was nothing left. This wasn't just about being ignored or insulted. This was deeper. This was betrayal. My son, my only child, had turned me into a running joke. His wife treated me like a servant. And my grandchildren were being taught to see me as a liar, a burden, someone to tolerate until they could finally let go of me forever. For years, I had poured everything into Daniel. My money. My time. My love. I had paid his way through college. Paid off his debts. Helped him get a house, a car, a comfortable life. I thought I was giving him a future. But all I had done was teach him that I would give and never ask for anything in return. The phone rang. I wiped my face and picked it up. Irene. It was Mia from the front desk. Her voice was gentle. I hope I'm not bothering you. Some of the staff mentioned they were a little concerned about you today. That one moment of kindness broke me all over again. I hadn't realized how starved I'd become for someone to just care. I'm fine, Mia, I said quietly. Thank you for checking. If there's anything we can do to make your stay more comfortable. I almost laughed at the irony. The employee of the hotel I owned was offering more care than my own son. Actually, I said, a thought sparking in my mind, there is something you can do. Of course. What do you need? I want a full record of all charges made to Daniel Parker's room. Meals, spa, room service. Everything. There was a pause. Yes, ma'am. May I ask why? Let's just say, I replied, staring out the window at the ocean, I'm finally seeing things clearly. As the sun set over the water in front of me, I made a quiet decision. They thought I was weak. They thought I was nothing. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, feeling every crack inside my chest. I didn't feel old, but I felt hollow. The kind of hollow you feel after years of giving and giving, only to discover you were never really seen. At sunrise, I made myself get out of bed. The waves outside were beautiful, soft blue and silver under the early light. Seagulls flew overhead, and for a second, I wished I were one of them, free, weightless, floating far away from here. But I wasn't a bird. I was a 72-year-old woman who just realized she was the joke of her own family. I'd spent years feeding wolves and pretending they were family. But I wasn't going to do that anymore. At 7 a.m., I knocked on the door to the manager's office. Mia opened it, still in her uniform blazer, her hair pulled into a neat bun. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Irene, she said softly, stepping aside. Come in. She handed me the folder I had requested. A full report of everything Daniel and Brielle had charged since they arrived. I sat down at the small round table in the office and flipped through the pages slowly. Spa treatments. Room upgrades. Premium wines. Designer boutique purchases. Extra services. They had even billed a private limo trip to my account. 17 different complaints Brielle had filed since arrival. She had demanded special meal preparations, scolded a housekeeper over a wrinkled pillowcase, asked the pool staff to clear out other children so hers could swim privately. What about Daniel? I asked, keeping my voice even. Mia looked hesitant. He wasn't as vocal. But he supported everything she did. Of course he did. There's something else, she added. I didn't include it in the report, but yesterday your daughter-in-law said something to another guest. I raised an eyebrow. What did she say? She told them that the resort was adequate, but that the owner was probably some old money heir who doesn't care about quality anymore. She said she could run this place better than whoever's in charge. I let out a slow breath. She said that? I asked. Mia nodded. I'm sorry, Irene. I know this must be hard. No, it wasn't hard. It was clarifying. I thanked Mia and left the office with the folder pressed against my chest. On the way out, I ran into Liam, the young waiter from breakfast. He looked nervous as he approached me. Mrs. Whitman, he said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else was nearby. I hope I'm not out of line, but I wanted to say something. I looked at him, giving him my full attention. The staff. We know who you are. We know you're the owner. And we've all seen how they treat you. My throat tightened. You've always been kind to us, he said. But watching them talk to you like that, it doesn't sit right with any of us. I swallowed hard. Thank you, Liam. That means more than you know. He hesitated. If there's anything we can do, anything you need. There is, I said, thinking fast. Keep being kind. Keep doing your job well. And document anything they say or do. He nodded instantly. You got it. That afternoon, I didn't go near Daniel or Brielle. I avoided them, even when they called asking where I had taken the kids. I needed space to think. Space to breathe. For the next 2 days, I watched them the way a storm watches from the horizon. Calm, but slowly building force. I watched Brielle scream at the concierge because her massage wasn't available at her exact preferred time. I watched her mock a housekeeper to her face for folding towels, like a peasant. I saw her throw a poolside fit because someone dared to sit in her cabana, even though it wasn't reserved. And Daniel? He just smiled. He supported her every step of the way. If she complained, he backed her up. If she insulted someone, he laughed like she was clever. When staff bent over backward to accommodate her, he didn't even say thank you. But what broke me completely, what tore something open in my heart, was what happened with my granddaughter. Mia scraped her knee near the pool. Nothing serious, just a small cut. She was crying, scared more than hurt. I rushed over, knelt down beside her, and gently cleaned the wound with a wipe from my purse. I whispered, "You're okay, sweetheart. You're very brave." She leaned into me, sniffling, letting me hold her for just a second. Then Brielle appeared, storming across the pool deck like a fury. "What happened?" she demanded, pushing me aside. "How could you let this happen?" "I was watching them," I said calmly. "She just slipped." "This is your fault," she snapped. "I told you to keep an eye on them. Were you even paying attention?" Mia clung to my arm, quietly sobbing, but Brielle didn't care. She started shouting at the lifeguard, then the hotel staff. And then she looked at Mia, who was still leaning into me for comfort. "Get away from her," Brielle said coldly. "I told you not to get too close. She won't be around much longer anyway." Right there. Right in front of her child. I couldn't believe the cruelty. How easy it was for her to dismiss me, like I was some old coat she was planning to throw out. That night, I stared into the mirror in my room. The woman looking back at me wasn't weak. She looked tired, yes, but behind her eyes, something fierce was starting to burn. That was the night I made all the calls. I called Richard, my attorney of 15 years. A brilliant man who had helped me build my business from the ground up. "Richard," I said. "It's Irene. I need advice. If someone's using my financial accounts without permission, credit cards, especially, what are my legal options?" His voice grew serious. "Has someone been defrauding you?" "Let's just say," I replied, "I'm tired of being used." He didn't need more explanation. He knew my family, knew the history. And he was already preparing what I needed. Then I called my accountant. Told him to pull every statement, every charge, every wire transfer linked to Daniel's name. Then I called Tom Peterson, my general manager and right-hand man, and gave him a quiet set of instructions that would go into effect immediately. I hung up the phone and stood in the middle of my suite, the ocean roaring softly outside. The sadness was still there, but it was changing. It wasn't hollow anymore. It had turned into fire. Our last full day at the Seabreeze Grand arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, golden sun, soft wind off the water. It was the kind of day people write postcards about. The kind I had designed this resort for. But to me, it all felt false. Too pretty for what was about to happen. Brielle had outdone herself. She had reserved the most exclusive private dining room for a farewell dinner. The sunset terrace. Floor-to-ceiling windows, imported marble floors, hand-painted murals, and a private balcony facing the sea. I had designed it to celebrate life's most important moments. She had no idea she'd chosen the very stage for her own downfall. "Tonight is going to be perfect," she said at breakfast, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "I've invited the Hendersons, the Martins, and that adorable couple from Boston. You'll watch the kids during dinner, right, Irene?" They get bored during adult conversations. Of course. One more night of being the help. One more night of being invisible. Of course, I replied softly. Inside, the words cut deep, but I was past flinching. Tonight, I would stop pretending. All morning, I moved through the resort like a shadow. I finalized my plans while Brielle got her hair curled and her nails redone. Daniel, as usual, pressed his shirt, practiced his smile, and ignored me completely. By early afternoon, everything was in place. Richard had worked through the night, preparing the documents. Tom had briefed the key staff members. Mia and Liam knew what to expect. The detectives had everything they needed, and were on standby. At 3 p.m., my phone rang. "This is Detective Moreno from the Sheriff's Department," a firm voice said. "We've reviewed the evidence. We're ready when you are." "Thank you," I said. "I'll call when it's time." The next few hours passed like a fog. I heard the door to Daniel's suite open and close as they moved around, getting dressed, rehearsing their smiles, preparing to impress people they had just met. They never asked if I needed help, never wondered what I would wear. To them, I was background noise. The help didn't need to look nice. But I looked nice anyway. I wore a navy blue silk blouse I hadn't worn in years. Simple pearl earrings. My hair was pinned gently. No makeup, just clean skin and quiet strength. I didn't look like the maid tonight. At 7 o'clock sharp, we arrived at the Sunset Terrace. The guests were already seated, sipping wine, commenting on the view. 6 couples, well-dressed, perfectly polite, greeted us with polite smiles. They gave Brielle and Daniel warm attention. When I was introduced, Brielle's voice was light, almost mocking. "This is Daniel's mother, Irene," she said with the same tone someone might use for a hired nanny. "She's been helping with the kids all week." Helping? I said nothing. Just smiled. Throughout dinner, the conversation circled around travel, stocks, real estate, and which countries had the best luxury spas. Brielle held court effortlessly, waving her wine glass, flashing smiles. Daniel followed her lead, throwing in jokes, adding little humble brags about their investments and parenting. I sat at the far end with Mia and Caleb, helping them cut their food, reminding them to use napkins. Whenever they asked a question or made a little noise, Brielle would throw sharp looks my way, blaming me silently. Midway through the third course, Brielle glanced at me and gave her final command of the night. "Irene, could you take the kids out to the balcony? They're getting a bit restless. We don't want to disturb our guests." The moment had arrived. The silence that followed her request was the perfect opening. I placed my napkin on the table slowly, stood up, and walked toward the head of the table where she sat. Her tone had been condescending. Her eyes didn't even fully meet mine. I looked down at her. "Come. Steady." "Actually, Brielle," I said clearly, "I think it's time we had an honest conversation." The room quieted. Every fork paused mid-air. Brielle blinked, confused. "What?" "You asked me to take the kids outside," I continued. "But I believe it's time for the adults to hear something real." I turned slightly and looked around the table. Every guest was watching me now. Curious, confused. "I know about your conversation by the pool cabana 3 days ago," I said, my voice low but strong. "The one where you both discussed how long I have left to live, and how you'll be free once I'm gone." Brielle's face lost its color. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "I heard it all," I continued, eyes locked on her. "How you called me pathetic. How you laughed about sending me to a state facility. How you told strangers I was delusional for claiming to own hotels." Daniel sat rigid, like he'd been turned to stone. The other guests were frozen, eyes darting between us. "Mom," Daniel started, his voice tight, "maybe we should." "No," I cut in. "We've done private. Now we do public." I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick folder. The papers inside rustled like a thunderclap. "I'd like to introduce myself properly," I said, addressing everyone at the table. "My name is Irene Coldwell. I am the founder and owner of the Seabreeze Grand and 16 other properties in 3 states. Gasps. One woman covered her mouth. "This room? I designed it. The food you're eating? The wine you're sipping? The staff who welcomed you? All part of the hospitality business I built from the ground up after losing my husband." I turned back to Brielle and Daniel, who now looked like ghosts. And this, I said, lifting the top page of the folder, is the deed to this hotel. My hotel. I laid out the next page. This is my financial report. My net worth is $47 million. Not broke. Not a burden. Not a maid. Another page. And this is a full accounting of every dollar the two of you have spent in the last 6 months. $68,000. All charged to my accounts. Spa treatments. Shopping. Vacations. Every bit of it my money. The room had fallen so quiet, I could hear the ocean outside. Brielle looked like she might be sick. Daniel stared at his plate, not blinking. Irene, Brielle whispered. Please let us explain. Explain. I repeated. Explain how you screamed at my employees and told them not to speak to me? Explain how you've poisoned my grandchildren against me for years. Daniel stood up, his face pale. We can fix this. No. Daniel. We can't. I pulled out my phone and hit the button I had prepared. Detective Moreno? I said calmly. Yes, we're ready for you. The reaction was immediate. Brielle knocked over her wine glass. Red liquid spilled across the white tablecloth like a warning. You called the police? She shouted. You called the police on your own family? I called the police on people who have been defrauding me, I said. Family or not, the law applies. Daniel reached toward me, desperate. Mom, please think about the kids. They don't deserve this. They deserved better than parents who taught them to hate their grandmother, I said. They deserved the truth. The guests were already gathering their things. I didn't blame them. No one wants to witness a family collapse in real time. As they slipped out, Brielle hissed, You're making a huge mistake. We're your family. If you do this, you'll die alone. I looked at her and finally felt something unexpected. Peace. I've been alone for years, I said. The only difference is, now I'm choosing it. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. And then the detectives walked in. Detective Moreno entered the dining room with another officer beside him. Both wore calm, serious expressions, and for the first time all week, someone walked in who didn't see me as invisible. Mrs. Caldwell? He asked gently. I nodded. They're the ones. Daniel Caldwell and Brielle Caldwell. Brielle stood up so quickly she almost tripped over her chair. Her hands were shaking, her voice high and full of panic. You can't be serious. This is insane. We're her family. Daniel's mouth moved, but no words came out. He just looked at me like I had betrayed him, like I had broken something sacred. But I didn't flinch. I had already cried enough. Are you pressing charges, ma'am? The detective asked. Yes, I replied. Fraud. Financial abuse. Misuse of credit cards. All of it. Daniel finally found his voice. You vindictive old woman, he snapped, his face red with anger. You're going to destroy your own family over some money? I looked at him. Not as a mother. Not as a victim. But as a woman who had finally stopped letting people walk over her. You already destroyed this family, Daniel. The moment you decided I wasn't worth respecting. The detective stepped forward and asked them both to come with them to the lobby for questioning. Brielle shouted something about lawyers. Daniel muttered something under his breath. Neither mattered anymore. They walked out under the warm glow of chandeliers I had picked out myself. And I sat down in the empty dining room, surrounded by half-finished plates and cold glasses of wine, letting the silence soak into my skin. That silence wasn't heavy this time. It felt like freedom. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Richard had prepared everything. Brielle and Daniel's attorney, ironically paid with money I had once given them, advised a plea deal. The evidence was too strong, too clear. They avoided jail time, but the damage was already done. The charges, credit card fraud, financial elder abuse, and identity misrepresentation, made the local papers. One headline read, Resort founder uncovers family fraud during vacation. I didn't speak to the media. I didn't need to. The truth spoke for itself. I immediately cut off their access to everything. The credit cards? Cancelled. The monthly payments I had been sending to cover their mortgage, gone. I froze every account linked to my name. Within 3 weeks, their house was listed for sale. Within 5, they were living in a small apartment across town. But money wasn't the only loss. Their friends disappeared too. The dinner guests who once clinked glasses with them at fancy restaurants no longer answered calls. The private school where Mia and Caleb were enrolled, tuition paid by me, sent warnings about unpaid balances. The country club revoked their membership. The people they used to impress were suddenly too busy. And I wasn't sad. I was free. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to wonder if someone was pretending to love me because of what I gave them. 3 months later, I received a letter. The return address was Daniel's new apartment. The handwriting was Brielle's. It was shaky, unsure, far from her usual neat, confident style. Dear Irene, we've made terrible mistakes. We've hurt you in ways we can't undo. The children miss you. Daniel understands now how wrong he was. Please, give us another chance to be the family you deserve. With hope, Brielle. I read it twice. Then carefully folded it and placed it into the filing cabinet alongside the police reports and court documents. It wasn't an apology. It was a request for access. Access to the life they lost. They hadn't learned anything, except that consequences were real. I didn't write back. Instead, I did something better. I started living the life I should have built years ago. I sold 2 of my smaller hotels and used the money to start something new. The Caldwell Foundation, a non-profit supporting elderly people who had been abandoned, manipulated, or mistreated by their families. It offered legal help, financial guidance, and community healing. The foundation's headquarters sat on the top floor of my newest resort in downtown Tampa, and I went to work every single day with a sense of purpose that no amount of pain could shake. I found a new kind of family there. People like Dr. Michelle Lynn, our medical advisor, who had once taken care of her own mother through heartbreaking final years. James, our legal coordinator, whose gentle spirit reminded me of the boy Daniel used to be. And Anna, who ran our group sessions. She had been financially abused by her adult children before finding the courage to walk away. They knew what it felt like to be discarded. They had scars too. And we healed together. We helped thousands of seniors. People who had been made to feel like burdens. People who thought they were alone. But we showed them they weren't. As for Mia and Caleb, they remained a quiet ache in my chest. I didn't blame them. They were young, impressionable, raised in an environment filled with lies. But I hoped, deep down, that someday they would ask questions. That someday they would want to know the truth. I set up 2 education funds for them. Private, protected, untouchable by their parents. Each would unlock at age 18, through the foundation, with or without a reunion. It wasn't about revenge. It was about giving them the chance to become something better than what they had been taught. A year passed. Then something unexpected happened. Sarah, my former front desk manager, now promoted to general manager of the Seabreeze Grand, asked to visit my penthouse. She sat across from me on the balcony, looking out at the ocean as we sipped iced tea in the early evening. Mrs. Caldwell, she said softly, the staff still talks about what happened last year. The way your family treated you. The way you stood up. It's become kind of legendary. I smiled. It wasn't easy. I know. But you changed more than just your life. A lot of our guests who heard about the foundation, some of them are going through similar things. They've been asking if there are retreats, programs, something to help. And just like that, an idea was born. Reclaim Your Life Retreats. We launched the first one 6 months later, right there at the Seabreeze Grand. A full week of support, group therapy, legal advice, spa care, safety, peace. Everything I wished I'd had back when I sat crying in that same hotel room. The Sunset Terrace, where I'd once stood with my heart in pieces, became a place of healing. The pool, where I'd overheard my own son talking about my death, now echoed with laughter from seniors learning to reclaim joy. We created something beautiful from something cruel. And maybe that was the best kind of revenge. Not destruction, but creation. Not yelling, but healing. The second year of the Caldwell Foundation brought more change than I had expected. Word spread quickly. First locally, then across state lines. Senior centers started reaching out. So did retirement homes, even lawyers from other cities. I was invited to speak at conferences to tell my story. Not because I was some icon, but because so many people had lived through the same silent betrayal. The world was full of people who had given everything to their children, only to be left behind once they were no longer useful. I didn't enjoy public speaking. I wasn't loud or polished like some CEOs. But I spoke from my heart, and somehow that was enough. Every time I stood at a podium and told my truth, people cried. Every time I explained how I had watched my own son laugh while his wife called me worthless, someone in the audience would come forward after with shaking hands and say, "That happened to me too." And I'd look them in the eyes and tell them, "It's not your fault. You didn't deserve that." I became a mirror for people who had never seen their pain reflected back at them. But even as the foundation grew, even as I became surrounded by love and support, there was a part of me that stayed quiet, tucked deep inside. It wasn't bitterness. It was grief. Not grief for the money I had lost or the lies that had been told. No, it was grief for what could have been. For the son I thought I raised. For the family I believed I had. For the nights I dreamed about Daniel calling just to say, "I love you, Mom," and not asking for something. But I had learned by now that dreams could be dangerous things if you held on to them too tightly. So I let the dream go, but not the lesson. One afternoon, just before the holidays, I received a message I wasn't expecting. It was from Mia. Not a letter. Not a card. A simple email. The subject line read, "I'm sorry." I stared at the screen for a long time before opening it. "Dear Grandma, I found out everything. About the hotels. The foundation. The things Mom and Dad said. I didn't know any of it. I thought you lied. I thought you were just sad and confused. But I see now. I was wrong. I've read the articles. I saw the videos. Your speeches. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I'm sorry for what I said at the pool. I remember that day. I was 8. And I remember thinking you were the only one who made me feel safe when I was scared. I wish I had known sooner. I don't know if you'll ever want to talk to me again. But I wanted you to know. I believe you. And I miss you. Mia." My eyes welled up before I even finished. It wasn't everything. It didn't fix the past. But it was a crack in the wall I thought would never break. I didn't respond right away. I let it sit in my heart for a week. Then 2. I wanted to make sure my answer came from the right place. Not anger, not pain, just honesty. When I finally wrote back, I kept it simple. "Dear Mia, thank you for your message. I'm glad you reached out. That day at the pool. I remember it too. I remember holding you, even when your mother told me to stay away. I remember thinking that maybe, just maybe, you'd grow up to be different. You have. Let's talk soon. I'd love to hear from you. Love, Grandma." After that, we began emailing every few weeks. Just short messages at first. Updates. Photos of her drawings. Then longer conversations. Her struggles in school, how she missed her old friends, how awkward her parents had become since the fallout. She never spoke badly about them, but it was clear something had shifted. A few months later, Mia asked if we could meet. We chose a quiet cafe in the city, not far from the Seabreeze downtown location. I arrived early, nerves dancing in my stomach like I was a teenager going on her first date. I wore the same navy blouse I'd worn the night of the big dinner. I wanted to look strong, but also open. She walked in slowly, her long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her eyes unsure but familiar. She was taller than I remembered. Her face had matured, but the sadness in her eyes, just like mine, was still there. "Hi," she whispered. I stood and without thinking, opened my arms. She walked right into them. And for a moment, neither of us spoke. We just held on. We spent 2 hours talking. She asked about my past. About the hotels. About Grandpa. She told me how confused she'd been for years, how the story they were told, how I was broke, dramatic, and embarrassing, was just normal to them. "But something didn't feel right," she said. "Even as a kid I thought you were more. I don't know why." I smiled. "Because you have a good heart. And hearts know when something's wrong, even before our heads do." We made a plan to meet again. And again. She didn't ask for money. She didn't want gifts. She just wanted me. And that was enough. That spring, she joined one of our youth volunteer programs, helping with elderly outreach. She stood beside me during one of our retreats and introduced herself as Irene's granddaughter. Not Daniel's daughter. Not Brielle's girl. But mine. It meant everything. As for Daniel and Brielle, they never apologized. Not really. Daniel sent a birthday card with no return address. Inside was a gift card and 2 words. Take care. It made me sad but not broken. He had made his choices. And now I was making mine. I didn't hate them. I didn't wish them harm. But I didn't owe them anything anymore. And that was something I wish more people understood. Love is not measured by how much pain you can survive for someone else. It's not about tolerating mistreatment for the sake of family. Sometimes love means walking away. Sometimes love means letting go. And sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to finally stop giving to people who never appreciated you in the first place. The years that followed were quiet, but not lonely. The foundation kept me busy. Every week, I met new people who reminded me that I wasn't alone in my story. Women in their 60s and 70s who had been forgotten by their children. Men who'd given their entire pensions to ungrateful families and were left with nothing. Some were angry. Some were numb. Some still clung to the hope that their kids would come around. And I understood all of them. Because once, I was one of them. I had known what it felt like to wait by the phone for a call that never came. To hear your child's voice only when they wanted something. To be reduced to a babysitter, a bank account, or a burden. But I had also learned something else. You don't have to stay in that pain. You don't have to sit in it forever. You're allowed to choose yourself. Even late in life. Especially then. That's what I told every person who walked through our foundation's doors. And over time I watched them change. I saw the way a simple act of kindness, a shared meal, a phone call, a hug, could start to rebuild someone's spirit. One woman, Linda, had been cut off from her children after she refused to sell her house and give them the money. She thought she'd spend her final years alone. Now, she ran our support groups, helping dozens of others like her. Another man, Paul, had been moved into a nursing home by his kids, who took control of his bank accounts and left him with $23 to his name. We helped him win a legal case and regain his independence. He now worked part-time at the front desk of one of my hotels, greeting guests with a smile no one could take away again. Helping others helped me too. It reminded me that healing wasn't about forgetting the pain. It was about not letting it define you anymore. I still lived in my penthouse by the bay. I still walked the same path every morning to watch the sunrise. But I started noticing more. The sound of the birds. The smell of salt in the breeze. The way the light sparkled on the water. I was living again. Not just surviving. Mia stayed in my life. Slowly, our bond grew stronger. She visited on holidays, helped with events, even stayed over during school breaks. We cooked together, laughed at old photos, watched movies under warm blankets like we used to when she was little. She brought pieces of light back into a part of my heart that had gone quiet. Sometimes, I would look at her and wonder how different things might have been if she had always known the truth. But then I reminded myself, it wasn't too late. We were building something new. Something real. And one morning, while we were having breakfast on the balcony, she asked a question I didn't expect. "Grandma," she said, stirring her tea slowly, "do you still love them?" She didn't say their names. She didn't have to. I looked out at the ocean for a long moment before answering. "I don't think love just disappears," I said softly. "It changes. It grows quiet. It stops trying to be heard. But in some way, yes. I think I still love them. Just not the way I used to." She nodded, understanding more than her age should allow. "It's okay if you don't," she said. "I know," I smiled. "But I don't carry the pain anymore. That's the difference." Later that week, I received a formal letter from Brielle. This time, it was typed, signed, and sent through a lawyer. She was filing for divorce. I didn't know the full details, but I could guess. Maybe Daniel's resentment had finally caught up to her. Maybe she'd grown tired of the life they had built on lies and half-truths. Or maybe, like me, she was simply done pretending. I didn't respond. It wasn't my business anymore. Daniel, however, sent another message. Not a card this time, but a voicemail. I almost deleted it without listening. But something made me press play. His voice was quieter than I remembered. Not broken, but not proud either. "Hi, Mom. I heard about Brielle filing. I guess you probably already know. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just wanted to say I've been thinking about everything. About the way I treated you. About how I let her talk to you. About how I stood by and let it all happen. There was a pause. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. That was it. No begging. No excuses. No promises to change. Just 7 words I had waited my whole life to hear. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't cry. I didn't fall apart. I simply saved the voicemail, closed my eyes, and let the words settle inside me like a stone sinking gently to the bottom of a quiet lake. Somewhere in that silence, I found peace. Because the truth is, we don't always get the ending we wanted. Sometimes the people we love don't love us back the way we hoped. Sometimes we build families that fail us. Sometimes the ones we raise forget how to care. But that doesn't mean we are worthless. That doesn't mean we are broken. It means we are human. We make choices. We live with consequences. We hurt. We heal. And if we're lucky, we grow strong enough to choose ourselves. I had chosen myself. Not with revenge. Not with anger. But with grace. With quiet strength. With the understanding that being loved by others was never going to mean more than finally learning to love myself. A year passed after that voicemail. Daniel never called again. He didn't follow up. He didn't try to visit. But somehow, that made the apology feel more real. He hadn't said it to get something from me. He said it because he finally saw what he had done. And that was enough. BraveHer vanished from our lives entirely. I never heard from her again. Not directly. But Mia told me things here and there. After the divorce, she moved to a smaller town. She got a job in marketing. Nothing fancy. Just work. Real work. She didn't have time for yoga retreats and 5-star spas anymore. She's quieter now, Mia said once. Tired. Not mean like before, but small. Like a balloon that's finally run out of air. I didn't smile at that. I didn't feel victory or satisfaction. Just a quiet sense of closure. People like BraveHer usually build their world on image, on how others see them. But when that image breaks, there's not much left. And Daniel? According to Mia, he still struggled. He moved from job to job, trying to rebuild a career he never really had to begin with. 4 years, he'd relied on money that wasn't his, name recognition that came from my hard work, and support he thought would never end. But the real world is unkind to people who never learn to stand on their own feet. Still, I didn't root for his failure. I hoped he found some kind of peace. I just knew I couldn't be the one to give it to him. Meanwhile, the foundation flourished. We opened new chapters in 3 cities. Seniors who once felt discarded now had a place to go, a place to speak, to be heard. I watched strangers become friends, survivors become advocates. I saw lives bloom that had once felt wilted and tossed aside. And I kept living mine. I learned to paint. Something I had always wanted to try but never found time for. I filled canvas after canvas with soft colors, gentle strokes. I didn't paint sadness or anger. I painted stillness. Peace. The kind I had fought so hard to find. I traveled too. Not for business but for joy. I took a cruise through Alaska with Sarah and Linda. I visited Spain with Anna from our team. I even took a solo trip to the mountains in Colorado, where I watched the snow fall in silence and thought, this is what healing feels like. Quiet, steady, strong. One day, while I was having lunch on the patio of a small cafe in Savannah, a woman stopped at my table. She looked around 60. She wore a wide-brimmed hat, had gentle eyes, and held a newspaper in her hand. She seemed unsure at first, but then smiled. "Are you Irene Caldwell?" she asked. I nodded. "I read about you. About the hotel. The family. The foundation." Her eyes watered. "I just wanted to say thank you. I left my husband last year after 30 years of emotional neglect. Your story. It helped me find the courage. I just wanted you to know that." I stood up and hugged her. No words. Just understanding. That kind of moment became more common. Strangers writing letters. Staff sharing stories. Even young people reaching out, saying things like, "You remind me of my grandmother. She passed, but I wish I had known how much she went through." And in every one of those moments, I felt like all the pain I had lived through wasn't wasted. It had been turned into something good. Something lasting. Something powerful. Back home, Mia continued to grow. She got into college on a partial scholarship and worked part-time at the foundation. She majored in social work, saying, "I want to help people like you do." She became her own person. Fierce. Kind. Brilliant. And though she still carried pain from her childhood, she used it as fuel, not chains. One night, during her winter break, we sat on the balcony of my penthouse again. The sky was clear. The stars looked close enough to touch. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think people can really change?" she asked. I thought about it. "Yes," I said. "But not everyone will." She nodded. "That's what I'm learning. Some people change because they have to. Others change because they finally want to. And some," I added, "never do. And that's okay too. It just means we change how close we let them stand." She smiled at that. Later, as we cleaned up, she picked up an old photo album. One of the few I hadn't thrown away. Inside were pictures of Daniel as a boy. At the beach. At his high school graduation. Holding baby Mia. "Do you ever miss him?" she asked quietly. I traced my fingers over one photo. Daniel at age 5, laughing on my lap, his little arms around my neck. "I miss who I thought he was," I said. "I miss the little boy who used to say, 'Don't worry, Mom, I'll take care of you when I grow up.'" She hugged me tight. "I'm sorry he didn't," she whispered. "I'm not," I replied. "Because if he had, maybe I never would have found out how strong I really am." That night, I slept soundly. No nightmares. No regrets. Just peace. Not the kind that comes from pretending everything's fine. The kind that comes from walking through fire and realizing, you're still here. You still matter. You still get to decide what happens next. The day I turned 75, I didn't throw a big party. I didn't rent a ballroom or invite the press or hang gold balloons from the ceiling. Instead, I spent it in the garden behind the foundation building. A quiet space filled with benches, flowers, and sunlight. A place we had built for the people who needed peace more than noise. There were no speeches. No gifts. Just the people who mattered. Mia was there, smiling as she handed me a slice of lemon cake with a single candle in it. "Make a wish," she said. I didn't close my eyes. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't want anything more. I had already found everything I truly needed. A few residents of the retreat center joined us. People I had once met through pain but now shared joy with. There was music playing softly, laughter rising like warm smoke in the air. No one was pretending. No one was hiding. Just real people. Living real lives. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all. It wasn't wealth, though I had that. It wasn't status, though I had earned that too. It was dignity. It was peace. It was the soft, quiet joy of being surrounded by people who loved me for who I was. Not what I could give. Later that afternoon, as I sat alone on the garden bench watching the light shift through the trees, a young woman approached me. She was a volunteer, new to the foundation. Barely 20. She looked nervous, clutching a notepad. "Mrs. Caldwell?" she asked softly. "Yes. I just wanted to say thank you. My grandmother was part of your last retreat. She came home different. Brighter." She said it was the first time anyone had treated her like a person in years. I smiled. "She is a person. And a precious one." The girl nodded, tears filling her eyes. "You made her feel seen." And right then, something inside me settled. Something I hadn't even realized was still unsettled. All my life, I had worked to be seen. By my husband, who left too early. By my son, who forgot my worth. By my daughter-in-law, who tried to erase me. And in chasing their approval, I had almost forgotten the one person I needed to be seen by most. Myself. But now, I didn't need anyone to validate my life. I had built something lasting. Something good. Something bigger than the pain that once tried to bury me. That evening, as the sky turned soft and pink, Mia sat beside me again. She didn't say anything at first. Just held my hand. Then she looked at me with those same eyes she had as a child. Curious, hopeful. "What's the one thing you'd tell someone who feels like you used to feel?" she asked. I thought for a long moment. Then answered honestly. I'd tell them this. You are not what people do to you. You are not how they treat you. You are not their mistakes or their cruelty. You are what you choose next. She let that sink in. And what did you choose? She whispered. I looked at her and smiled gently. I chose to stop shrinking myself for people who never clapped when I grew. I chose to let go of the ones who only loved me when I was useful. I chose to protect my peace, even if it meant losing people I once called family. I chose to start over at 70. And I chose to believe that it's never too late to become someone you're proud of. Tears filled her eyes. You did it, Grandma, she whispered. You really did it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that truth settle fully in my bones. Yes, I did. I survived what should have broken me. I turned betrayal into purpose. And I proved, quietly, fiercely, that no one gets to decide your worth but you. So here's the lesson, the one I leave behind for anyone who has ever felt abandoned, used, or unloved by the people who were supposed to care the most. Family is not always blood. Respect is not earned through sacrifice alone. And love should never feel like a trap. You have a right to peace. You have a right to walk away. And you always, always, have the power to begin again. Even if they called you old. Even if they said you were useless. Even if they tried to silence you. You are not done. Your story is not over. And if no one ever told you this before, let me be the first. You matter. You always did.